Back in the day, when I was a young, aggressive, mostly young, and very aggressive, and still in the business and success-driven world kind of guy, back in career one, I had a friend named Rob Mole. And Rob was a big shooter with a big Dutch bank in Toronto. And he and his wife, Karen, were good friends of ours. And we hung around with them and were getting to know them quite well. And things were going quite well until their marriage started to crack. And very soon after that, started to completely disintegrate and fall apart. Rob was very successful in what he did, but he worked round the clock, non-stop, for this bank. So every time we went there, we, got the sense that he got home about a half an hour before we'd show up on a Sunday night or a Friday night to visit with them. So big-time workaholic. And his wife, Karen, tried to make things better for him, tried to wake him up. She was very patient and loved him dearly and wanted him so much to see that there was more. But Rob couldn't see. And eventually, they split up, and we lost touch for about a year or so until we got the phone call. While sitting in his car at a traffic light in Mississauga, Rob has a massive heart attack and dies right there on the spot at the age of 30 years old. And I can still feel the shock. I'd almost forgotten that story until it came back to me this week. My frenetic life, I was envious of his doing so well and being so successful. And my life, which was sort of like that, just came to a complete stop. Like how you feel when you go to a funeral that is premature and one of those tragic funerals, and you go there and you wake up for a second, right? Or when you're driving down the highway and you see so many ambulances and fire engines that you know that this is a serious accident and somebody is seriously hurt or has died. Like how you feel that feeling I was feeling. It was sort of like, kind of like, a lot like, in a more eternal sense, how I felt when I first heard this parable. This is from the Gospel of Luke chapter 12. It's called the Parable of the Rich Fool. There's a little intro that Jesus has, and then a little application at the end. Christ said, or someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And then he said to them, the people who were gathered around, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And then Jesus told him a parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" This, Jesus said, is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, for herself, but is not rich toward God. That's haunting, too. And in a sense, life and death are even a smaller thing than the haunting consequences of what Jesus said right there. And it should be especially haunting for all of us living in Calgary in this highly driven, type A, lucratively oriented urban environment situated in the most prosperous, one of the most prosperous countries in the world and one of the most prosperous provinces in that country, in the world, living in a highly capitalist-driven society, possessing so much stuff compared to the rest of the world, These ought to be, if you're tracking with Christ and trying to follow what he teaches, scary words. I mean, I always ask, how do you know that you're not that guy? I mean, I always read into that story a guy who's much richer than I am, right? And then I'm okay. But, I mean, really, how do we know? How do we know, how do you know that you won't hear those words? You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This, Jesus says, is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. Which leaves me very, very interested in defining what rich toward God looks like. I can tell you what rich toward God doesn't look like. Here's the parable again. And here's what not being rich toward God looks like. This parable of Jesus is not about condemning wealth or possessions. God made stuff and gives us all kinds of great things for life. It's not about that per se. It's about losing focus on who those things really belong to. Himself, I'll do, my barns, I will, all, myself, my. It's about realizing in the eternal sense, the kingdom of God sense of reality, this other world that mysteriously parallels and is infused into this life and world that we live, that we're really just bit players or actors on a stage in someone else's play, playing with someone else's stuff. It's about realizing that every gift that you possess, every ability, everything that's uniquely you, that enables you to do so much in our world and consume and possess so much, your entrepreneurial gut feel that just lets you know how to do a deal and when to do it and when to walk away, that savvy management skill that you bring to your team, your keen eye for the next thing in business or in academia or in fashion, your superb analytical skills or creative capacities, your ability to learn, the mind that God has given you for school, all of those things were made by God. And in a way, and it is you, of course, but in a way you are stewarding God's stuff. Everything you have is a gift from God.